Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you are new here, I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. It's giving Halloween. I put up some cobwebs. Steve's getting covered up, but he can deal with it. He looks good up there. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Anna. I am a certified yapper, and one day hopped on the internet and decided that I would yap about true crime and hopefully build a community of people who are interested in the same thing. And I think I got lucky. And I think I found you. I post 2 videos a week, every single week, for you to enjoy new true crime interesting cases. So if, like me, true crime is your jam, I highly suggest that you subscribe, get the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, because, you know, there could be bonus uploads coming your way. So today we are covering a highly requested case yet again. This is a case of Diane Downs. I hate this woman. I hate her. I hate her. I hate her. I hate her and her little mushroom haircut that she gets. I hate her. This woman is just like the epitome of evil. This woman just really, she's climbing that ladder. Like, she is trying to take the pinnacle of evil prize. But Diane Downs, she loved the boys. She really loved the boys. And when one boy in particular doesn't want to be with her, he takes the cowardly way out and says that her children is the problem. You know, her children, they're baggage, they are strings attached that he does not want, and therefore he can't be with her. When really he didn't want to be with her because she was a complete and utter fruitcake. Diane Downs, what she would do to be with a man she thinks that she loves. This evil, horrific monster of a woman, she would attempt to murder all 3 of her children just to try and get with a man who didn't even want to be with her. Now, as usual, before we get into this case, please make sure you leave a comment down below. It can be an emoji, it can be a question, it can be slander about Diane Downs. That is very much welcome. Or it can just be a generic comment, whatever you like. By commenting down below, it really does help boost my engagement, really pushes me out to the YouTube algorithm, which I so desperately need. I want to do this full time so bad. Like, I just, honestly, the amount of content I would create if I was doing this full time, unbelievable. And like the things I want to do, I want to help people. A couple of weeks ago, right, before we get into this, the case of Willie Francis, if you've not watched it, you absolutely should. It was a young black boy who was executed twice for a crime that there was no proof he even committed, and there was actually proof pointing to the police committing it. Listen, I've reached out to Nancy Grace, I've reached out to the lawyers of George Stinney. I'm in the UK, right, but I'm trying to contact America because this young boy needs to be exonerated. I'm writing letters in my free time. I'm so passionate about this, it is unbelievable. My begging's done. Without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the case of Diane Downs. So I've added spider webs. What do we think? There is spiders in them, but you can't see it because, like, the background blur. Kinda like it, but Steve, the channel mascot, has been covered up, and like I feel guilty, but low-key it looks good. Also, I cannot believe I forgot to show you this in the last video. I have a huge Chucky doll, and like, he literally has a weapon, like a weapon. Like, he could kill me in my sleep. He doesn't, he's great, but I really feel like he should be up here somewhere, but he's just that big. Like, look, he's got shoes and stuff. Phenomenal. I need one in every horror character. But I'm also like perspiring profusely, but we'll just say it's like a bit of added glow for the makeup. And honestly, see, for this case, I was like, let me roll up my mother sleeves, because this woman, I want to punch her in the face so bad. Her and her bad mullet haircut from back in the day. So Diane Downs, she was born on August the 7th of 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona. And she was born to Danish and English American parents by the name of Wesley Linden and Willadine Fredrickson. Fredrickson was the surname, so she was Diane Fredrickson before she was Diane Downs. Wesley and Willadine, oh, love that. Is that like alliteration there? But Wesley and Willadine, they would marry in 1954, and then Diane Downs came into the picture not too long after. Now, Wesley, as a parent, he was described as being very arrogant, very criticising, very aggressive. Like, in this household, no one could do right in the eyes of Wesley. Like, he was God and everyone else was just like these little minions who had to do what they were told. He would set up like really strict, insane rules in the household, and it did seem like he had full control over Willadine. Like, the woman wouldn't pass wind without asking for permission. Apparently Wesley, he had a big problem with Willadine spending any time with Diane. It was kind of like he got jealous whenever Willadine wanted to, you know, bond with their own child. It's given mommy issues. Like, Willadine, what do you mean you want to spend time and look after your newborn, defenceless, depends on you completely little child when you've got your husband here? A full grown ass man who still needs you to cut up his steak and take the peas out his vegetables. Diane at one point, right, she tries to say that her father abused her from a very young age, like around 12 years old, and she claims that she believed this was the reason that Wesley didn't want Willadine spending that much time with Diane, in case she maybe noticed anything was wrong, like any injuries, any bruises, you know. But weirdly, later, Diane would completely take this statement back. She claimed that it was just a lie. I made it up. No harm, no foul. And obviously Willadine and Wesley, they completely denied these allegations as well. So Diane's family was formed of very strict conservatives with a lot of different rules in place, strict rules that would align with their values. And of course, Willadine and Wesley, they expected that Diane should align with their values and follow their rules. In school, Diane, she was not allowed to wear makeup. She wasn't allowed to dress fashionably. And as you can imagine, being at school, bullies had a field day with this. They would bully Diane. They said that she looked like a 1950s housewife whilst they're all swanking about in the best of gear. And she looks like some kind of old matron. Age 14, Diane decides, I'm going to rebel. I am going to do what I want when I want, and no one, Willie and Wesley, is going to tell me what to do. So Diane, she goes through this really rebellious phase at the age of 14, which, if I'm honest, is not too alarming. We've all been there and done that. Sorry, mum and dad. So while she was a freshman at Moon Valley High School, she started dressing like a full-grown woman, and she would only date older boys. And one of these older boys that she would date would be Stephen Downs. And immediately, once they're together, they do become like this inseparable couple. It really seemed like they loved each other. Now, Willadine and Wesley, when they met Diane Downs' newest piece, Stephen Downs, they weren't a fan. Like, from the offset and throughout, they were not a fan at all. They thought Diane was too good for him, which, like, and they also believed that he did not align with the family values. But then again, neither did Diane. Match made in heaven. But of course, little Diane Downs, she is a complete rebel at this age, and she decides that she is going to continue this relationship with Stephen Downs. So they go through high school together and they end up graduating together as well, still having this really close, like, inseparable bond. But there would be a slight spanner in the works when Stephen, he would enlist in the US Navy, which of course meant that he would have to move away for his work, leaving Diane behind. So with Stephen going away to the US Navy, Diane's thinking, you know, I could use this time to be productive. So she would join the Pacific Coast Baptist Church College, and this was in Orange of California. But as you can probably imagine, this just wasn't the right environment for Diane. You know, it's not a place that she would thrive, and less than a year later, she would be expelled for promiscuous behaviour. Yeah, she was a little promiscuous one, her. Now, because of this expulsion, this meant that she had to return home and live with her parents, which she desperately did not want to do. In 1973, the Lovebirds, Stephen and Diane, they were reunited, and it was just like magic. They vowed that they would never be apart again, no matter what it took. So on November the 13th of 1973, Diane and Stephen, they decided to get married. Wedding bells, people. It was just a wholesome, gorgeous, sunshine and rainbows moment. But it wasn't really, because Diane would reveal that she didn't in fact marry Stephen for love. She married Stephen so she would have an excuse to leave home. she didn't actually want to be with Stephen, but he'll do for now. He gets her out the house. So outwardly, as it always is in these cases, Diane and Stephen, they appear to be a normal, somewhat happy couple to the public eye. They didn't tell anyone else about their struggles in their relationship, but my God, behind closed doors, these two practically hated each other. Like, kind of despised each other, to be honest. They would constantly argue. They always argued about financial worries, financial stresses, which of course can put pressure and stress on any relationship. But there was also a lot of arguments regarding infidelity, particularly from Diane. Despite all these arguments at home, Diane thinks to herself, do you know what? I really want to have a baby. And I don't really care if Stephen wants a baby, because, like, I want one, so we're going to have one. So Diane does not talk to Stephen about this, doesn't say what her plans are. She one day just stops taking her birth control and they start having unprotected sex. And voila, would you know it, this is how babies happen. Sex ed with Anna and Steve. So Diane soon falls pregnant, tells Stephen. He's low-key shocked because thought you were taking stuff for that, but okay. So Christine Ann Downs, she would be born on October the 7th of 1974, and she would later be better known as Christy. And Christy, she would be the oldest of the Downs children, because believe it or not, Diane is gonna have more. And then on January the 10th of 1976, would you believe it, another baby pops out of Diane, and that would be Cheryl Downs. At this point, Stephen's thinking, I can't trust this woman for love nor money. Like, we've discussed this, she was meant to be back on birth control. But Diane again, out of the blue, decides she wants another baby, and who cares what Stephen thinks? I'm just going to stop taking birth control and see what happens. And when talking about Diane later on, Stephen would say that Diane was the only woman he knew that would get pregnant just to cheer herself up. Having a bad day? Get pregnant, why not? And honestly, do you know what sickens me is, and we'll get into this, right, but I just want to say it now, it really sickens me that there are women out there who are desperate to be mothers but cannot get pregnant, no matter how hard they try, no matter what treatments they go through. Some women just cannot get pregnant, whether it's medical issues or, you know, if it's something to do with their health that they really shouldn't get pregnant, like if it put them in danger. Then there's women like Diane Downs who gets pregnant so bloody easily and doesn't even want or care for our children. It infuriates me. So after the birth of Cheryl, Stephen decides, like, I cannot trust this woman to take birth control. I can't trust her to tell me the truth. So I'm going to get a vasectomy, which should hopefully stop any more children from arriving. Now, Diane, she would end up pregnant again at this point from Stephen, so she claims. But this child, for some reason, she decided to go ahead and terminate this baby. However, she would go on to have another child, but her third child would be the result of an infidelity with a colleague by the name of Mark Sager. On the 29th of December 1979, Diane Downs would give birth to her youngest son, Stephen Daniel Downs, but he's better known as Danny. He went by his middle name. And by the time Danny was born, he wound up being born into a very, very unhappy home with Stephen and Diane on the brink of a divorce. Like, they hated each other, hated each other's guts, and it would be revealed to Stephen that he wasn't Daniel's father. And although he tried to accept Danny as one of his own, he couldn't see past the infidelity that Diane Downs had committed. The couple then divorced in 1980. So at the time of the divorce, Diane Downs, she was only 25 years old, and let's just say she wasn't Mother of the Year, right? And it's not like a struggling single mum who's doing her very best. Diane Downs just didn't care to try her best. She wasn't really wanting to give her best to these children. And Stephen Downs, he even said that Diane Downs did not give a single crap about their children. He also said for someone who enjoys being pregnant so much, she doesn't enjoy raising the child, which, yep, we're getting into it, but absolutely 100% agree. Now, Diane Downs, she is a woman that does not know how to be alone. So she would spend the next couple of years bouncing from man to man, quite literally, She would move in with one and then she'd move out and then she'd move in with another one and she would move out. And in between all of this, she's desperately trying to reconcile with Stephen because, surprise, surprise, Diane Downs does not want to work. She wants someone there providing for her. Why should she have to get a job? She is a mother of 3 children. She needs help. Well, you need help if you were actually raising your children, but considering the fact that they were deemed to be malnourished, I highly doubt you were trying. So at this point, Diane Downs is thinking, money's starting to get a bit tight around here. Can't seem to buy myself my luxuries that I want. Never mind the children though, just me. Can't afford the stuff that I want. So she's thinking, I might have to get a job. The time has come. And her job, she wanted to be a surrogate, which, don't get me wrong, surrogacy, amazing. Such an amazing thing that you can do for people who want children. Absolutely love that. But someone like Diane Downs, I'm not so sure. But yes, this is Diane Downs' perfect plan to, get some financial gain. She's going to be a surrogate. She'll give birth to these babies and then hand them over to the couples who request her as their surrogate. Is that how it works? I'm not entirely sure. But Diane Downs would not be able to become a surrogate because she would fail 2 of the psychiatric tests that you need to pass, 2 separate ones for 2 potential mothers. And one of these exams actually indicated that she was psychotic. Now, Diane, finding out she was, deemed to be psychotic, you would think that she would be a bit bothered by this. But no, Diane, she brags to her friends like, I'm psychotic. Finds it hilarious that she's psychotic. So at this point, Diane's surrogacy dreams, they're not coming true. And she decides, I might actually have to get a job. Can you believe it? Poor Diane's having to work. So in 1981, Diane would start her job as a postal carrier in Arizona. And of course, whilst you're working, you're going to need to set up some childcare. So children would be sent to various family members to watch whilst she worked. But it is said, even when she was finished her shift, she wouldn't exactly rush home to pick up the children. She would take some more time for herself and pick them up whenever she felt like it. So not too long after this, neighbours are starting to, raise some concerns regarding the treatment of the Downs children. Neighbours had reported that the Downs children, they were constantly hungry. They would beg neighbours for food. And in the height of winter, they wouldn't have coats on and their shoes were just not appropriate for the weather conditions. They could tell that they were being badly mistreated by their mother. Now, neighbours had also picked up on the fact that when Diane couldn't find any childcare, she would leave 6-year-old Christy in charge of looking after Danny, who would be 1 year old, and Cheryl, who would be 4. A child looking after an even younger child and an infant. And what's really devastating as well is at one point, Cheryl, she actually goes and tells a neighbour that she is terrified of her own mother, scared to go home to her mother because she feels like her mum doesn't even like her, which is just honestly heartbreaking. This little child, this 4-year-old, is picking up on the fact that she feels like her mother hates her. She doesn't feel safe with her mum, the one person, or at least the one of 2 people who your child should feel most safe with, and she doesn't. Diane's ex-husband Stephen, he would say the following statement about Diane regarding the treatment of her children. So Stephen said, Diane forbade everything to the children. If Danny demanded a little attention, she rejected him. But the worst was one day I caught Cheryl jumping on her bed and I told her that that was not allowed. I made her sit down and think about what she had done. Bit extreme, by the way, but it is what it is. Can be dangerous, I suppose. Cheryl remained calm while looking up and asked, is there a gun here? I replied that no, and I wanted to know the reason for this question, to which she told me, I want to kill me. My mom says I'm bad. Can you imagine that coming out of your child's mouth? They actually want a gun. They even know what a gun is and what a gun does, and they want to shoot themselves because their mum says that they're bad. Their mum has made them feel so terrible and so worthless at that age, the age of 4, that they want a gun. I need to just remain calm because Well, I've still got a lot of this case to cover. So despite the horrific and monstrous treatment of her own children, somehow later this year, Diane would be accepted into the surrogacy programme. Don't know how she passed that test. You know, I'm not going to question it, but apparently she did. And Diane would earn $10,000 for carrying a baby to term and then surrendering this baby to adoptive parents. And it was within this time period that Diane Downs, Diane Fredrickson now at this point, she found herself a new love interest. And this was a colleague by the name of Robert Knickerbocker. And he goes by the nickname Nick, so we're calling him Nick. So Diane's new hunk of burning love, Nick, he was actually married at the time that him and Diane had started this affair. And he even had his own children at this point, right? And he's having an affair with bloody Diane Downs. Like, get some standards. Anyway, they're having this good old time, but Diane seems to want something more serious. And Nick's thinking like, whoa. Let's pump the brakes on this love train because I want to get off at the next stop. This is getting too serious. I don't want to be a daddy to your children. And when Nick was looking for the perfect excuse to break up with Diane, he would use the children as that excuse. Don't be such a wimp, Nick. Just tell the psychotic woman that you do not want to be her lover anymore. So in April, desperate Diane, she moved herself and her family to Springfield, Oregon. Now, naughty Nick. Naughty Nick tells her, I'm going to divorce my wife. As soon as that divorce is finalised, I'm going to come and join you and the kids in Springfield, Oregon, and we'll make a go of it and live a nice happy life. So Diane, she's like trying to put down roots here, so she gets herself a postal service job again. And just as she is settling into life in Springfield, Oregon, Nick would get in contact. So Nick, he tells Diane that her children, they make the affair feel like there's just too many strings attached. It's suddenly too serious. Like, he was just in it for a good time, not a long time. He was in it for the casual sex, not to run a daddy daycare centre on his days off. So Nick basically says that he views the children as baggage to Diane and he can't commit to her because of this. Diane at this point is growing even more resentful of her children than what she already was because she believes that her children are the fault of this relationship breaking down. So Diane Downs' way of thinking in this moment in time is like, how am I ever going to find love if I've got these 3 bags attached to me, meaning her children? Because at the end of the day, that's how she views her children, as baggage. And I'm sure any mums out there, and I know I've got you because some of you have just had babies. Sorry, I'm getting off topic, but it makes me really happy. Shout out to all the little new true crime babies in the community. But I know so many of you out there will think, you know, if a guy said that to me, if they were saying that my children was baggage or too many strings attached, you'd be like, ew. You would tell them where to go. You would not put up with that. Most healthy adults realise and just feel that their child is their whole entire world. But as we know, there are a few rotten eggs on that farm. They're not all organic and fresh. There's a few rotten ones. There's a lot of rotten ones. So at this point, Diane's children are like suffering from starvation. They are malnourished at this point. But all Diane cares about is writing in her stupid little diary about Nick, the affair, how it ended, her children being the issue, like as if that's her only flaw. Like, babe, are you okay? Look in the mirror, take a self-reflection class because you are the issue. Now, listen, we've probably all heard someone say that they would do anything for the person they love. They would kill for the person they love. They would do anything to be with that person. I mean, we've seen it in the Cinnamon Brown case, not in that way, but the fact that she would have done anything for her dad because she loved him so much. But there has to come a time where that person thinks, how far would I actually go for this person? What are they truly worth? And for Diane Downs, Nick, he was worth murdering her own children in the hopes and in the pursuit that she might be able to win Nick back. No guarantees, but my God, is she going to try? So we're now going forward to 10:48 p.m. on May the 19th of 1983 when a red Nissan sports car would pull up in front of the Mackenzie Willamette ER. Now, a young woman would scramble her way out of the driver's seat front door, screaming, "Help, someone's killed my kids." This woman seems frantic, she's kind of distraught, she's begging for help. This looks like a woman in complete desperation. Now, horrifically, in this red Nissan sports car, there would be 3 children covered in blood because they had been shot at close range. Horrifically and devastatingly, 7-year-old Cheryl, she was already dead when she had arrived at the hospital. And the other 2 children, Christy and Danny, they were barely hanging on for life. Like, they were clinging on. But honestly, it was like a 50-50 of whether they would make it or whether they would also lose their life. So at this point, 8-year-old Christy, she has actually suffered a stroke due to severe blood loss. And 3-year-old Danny, he was now paralysed after receiving a bullet to his spine. And suspiciously, Diane Downs, the mother in need, the desperate mother who wants her children to get help, she has a minor gunshot wound on her arm. That's weird. Hey, like, that's really weird that our children are hanging on for life and one is actually passed away, being murdered, and she only has a really minor gunshot wound to her arm? Weird. So Diane Downs in the hospital, she starts telling, the hospital staff that she and her children have been a victim of a carjacking gone wrong. And like, they say gone wrong, but what's really right about a carjacking? Like, that never really makes sense to me. Like, how can it go wrong when it's already wrong? So Diane Downs, she claims that this carjacking took place on a rural road in Springfield where this dishevelled, bushy-haired man just came out and attacked them. So Detective Doug Welch of the Lanes County Sheriff's Department, he comes over to question Diane about, what had happened that evening, what exactly took place, just get some details, get a description of the perpetrator, the man who has just murdered and attempted to murder her and her children. Now, when Diane starts talking to the police and things get very animated, this is when police and hospital workers become very suspicious that her story doesn't quite line up. She's acting a bit shifty. So Detective Doug Welch and also the hospital staff, they said that Diane was far too calm. Her manner, her demeanour was just not appropriate for someone who's just been in such a traumatic incident, who has just lost one of her children with her 2 other children in life-threatening condition. She was not acting in that manner. You'd think she was there on a wee 1-week holiday. And not only was she acting weird, but some of the stuff she was saying was just so goddamn out of pocket that they were like, there is no way that her story's true. So Diane Downs, right, she claims that evening she was on her way back from a friend's house and she decides to take this rural back road in Springfield, Oregon, a place that she's not even that familiar with, and she decides that she is going to go sightseeing. At night time, in the pitch darkness. Diane, unless you are bringing night vision goggles with you, I don't think you're going to see much. So on this sightseeing journey, Diane Downs, she looks in her rear view mirror and she can see that all the children have fallen asleep in the back seats. So she's driving along and Hungry Like the Wolf, that song, Hungry Like the Wolf, that comes on and she's driving along this really dark rural road where she sees a man sort of like flagging in the middle of the road. He's got really bushy hair and he looks like he needs help. Now, this was around 10 p.m. She has sleeping children in the car. She's a tiny woman. She's on a dark road and a shaggy-haired, bushy-haired man flags her down. Would you stop for that with your children in the car? Let me know. So Diane Downs, Mother of the Year, right? She decides to slow down, pull up alongside this shaggy-haired man. She turns off her car, takes her keys out of the ignition and jumps out to see what's wrong. I just need to interject here, right? Because if I ever am driving my car late at night on a rural dirt road, or any road for that matter, right, and you're trying to flag me down, making out that you need help, I'm gonna drive by you. I'm sorry, I might shout out my window to you like, don't worry, I'm phoning the police. I'm going to call the police to come and check you out. Like, I'm not going to come check you out. And the thing is, you can't trust anyone these days because people put babies' car seats on the side of the road or babies' prams, or they have like baby dolls that cry to make you get out your car to see what's wrong. And then they catch you and then they murder you or do some dodgy stuff with you. And I don't want to be a victim of that. and neither should you. So if ever you're driving and you see someone that looks like they need help, drive by, shout out the window if you must, but even that's a risk. Phone the police and let them deal with it, because not your circus, not your monkey. That's what I say. Like, you just never know people's intentions, so do not ever take that risk. Like, it might sound bad, but even if you look injured, if I can see like blood and stuff like that, I'm still going to be side-eyeing you, and it would take a lot for me to stop, unless you were like Alison Botha. You know what happened to Alison Botha? Yeah, okay, I'd pull over then because I can see quite clearly that you're very, 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 very injured, and I would want to help. But if you're just flagging me down, I'll get you help, but I'm not going to be your help. So anyway, devious Diane, right, hops out the car, asks the man, like, is everything okay? And the man just point blank says, I want your car. My response would be to try and run to my car and, you know, get away with my children safely. Diane says, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Huh? So Diane then says that this shaggy-haired man, he shoves her out the way, like shoves her to the ground. He then runs over to the car, points the gun into the car, and starts shooting the children in the back seats. Now, whilst this is going on, Diane, the hero, right, mother of the year yet again, she says that she was trying to distract him, so she pretends to throw the car keys away into a bush, and then when he's distracted and like trying to look for them, she shoves him out of the way, jumps into the driver's seat, and drives like a lunatic to the nearest hospital. We will later find out she was driving at a snail's pace.
I stopped and got out and asked him what was the problem. And he said, I want your car. And I said, you gotta be kidding. I mean, how many people really do that in real life? They don't.
Now Diane, of course, she's got her little wound, and she says that she had gotten this during the scuffle with the man. He had like shot her to try and get her away. Oh, and also a really important fact that Diane wanted the police to know, so like I'll have to tell you because quite clearly it's important. Hungry Like the Wolf, that was playing throughout this attack, throughout this scuffle, the shooting. It's like something at a movie. Like the way she's like acting this out and being so animated, as if she is like a child telling this really elaborate lie. Like those children at school who just BS all the time and make out that these mad things happen to them. Like Jay from The In-Betweeners, if you're from the UK, if you've ever watched that, you'll know exactly what I mean. But he just tells lies upon lies, and they're the most outrageous lies that you know the person's lying. This is Diane Downs. Now police, just to be on the safe side, they're like, well, we better put out an APB for this bushy-haired man, right? That's all they had to describe him by, an APB for a bushy-haired man. At this period in time, that could have been many, many men. My God, like, leave them alone. And even though they put out this APB, the police and hospital and anybody else who hears the story, they're just not convinced by Diane Downs. Police are thinking, first of all, who goes sightseeing in the dark? Just like I thought. Who the hell goes sightseeing in the dark? Unless you're going to go look through like a telescope at the stars, I'm not buying it. And second of all, who the hell pulls over for a creepy man in the distance, unbrushed hair, bushy as anything, who's flagging you down to stop in the middle of nowhere? No one. So police immediately, right, they're already seeing all these red flags. The first one that was really big for them was the fact that when Diane Downs got to the hospital, right, bearing in mind she said she drove like a lunatic, jumped in her car, went right to the hospital. But when she arrived at the hospital, her wounded arm had already been bandaged up. Where did you find time for that? And the other thing is that her right arm was incredibly clean and spotless despite the mass amount of blood that was inside that vehicle. How does that happen? Have you washed it in a burn? Now, police had also stated that Diane was very emotionally flat. She didn't really have much reaction to the fact that she was in this really traumatic incident and that 2 of her children were in life-threatening danger, and 1 of her children had even died.
I just kept saying, God, do what's next. You know, if they gotta die, let them die, but don't let them suffer.
She had no reaction to it. There was no sadness. She was just completely unbothered. And the only thing she kicked up a fuss about at that hospital was the fact that she wanted to call her boyfriend Nick. Little quick quiz here for you, quick knowledge test. Does anyone remember why Nick said he broke up with Diane? I'll give you a couple of seconds. Was because of her children. If you said that, you got it correct. Because of her children. Her children were baggage, apparently. And Diane's trying to get back in contact with this guy now that one of her children are dead, and she suspects that the other two is also going to die. So Diane, she is then informed that her son Danny, 3-year-old Danny, has been paralysed. And Diane, she's not upset or really that emotionally bothered. However, she did say that she was confused. You know, she's very confused because she would have thought that the bullet had hit his heart and not his spine. But for Diane, that was just some wishful thinking. And honestly, like, I just cannot believe this is true, but it is. When speaking to the police, Diane had also said, "Boy, this has really spoiled my vacation." What? And the other thing that bothered her is her car. She had even said, "That really ruined my new car. It's got blood all in the back of it." And fair enough, maybe when people are in shock and they've suffered trauma, they like disassociate. But the police are like, what the? Like, "Diane, did you just hear me? Your child is paralysed. Your 3-year-old child is paralysed." And she's like, no, yeah, I hear you, but my car. Like, does insurance cover that? What? Hello, is your lights on? So now, the famous reenactment. I'm sure we all know exactly what this reenactment is. But 4 days after the attempted murder of 2 of her children and the murder of 1 of her children, Diane Downs is brought down by the Lane County Sheriff's Department to do a reenactment of the events, just so they can try and piece things together, you know, help catch that murderer. They're looking at you, Diane. Diane, she could not wait to jump out that car and reenact. Like, she was loving life. She felt like she was in a movie. And she was about to relive what should have been the most traumatic event of her life. But she was so happy to do so. So Diane hops into the car, right? Looks in the rear view mirror and starts primping her hair. Making sure everything's okay. Fixing her makeup, touching it up in the mirror. Making sure that she is camera ready.
Sitting in the car is Elizabeth Diane Downs.
She can be seen sitting in the car, and she's kind of primping, making sure that her hair looked the way she wanted it.
And at this point, the cameras are already rolling, right? So the police have got all of this on tape. So she's smiling and laughing while she's telling the story of how this attacker murdered and attempted to murder her own children and also shot her in the arm. But she's laughing and giggling away. And at one point, she bumps her cast on the car and she like giggles out loud. She says, "That almost hurt more than..." And this bit was really strange to the police. The police had suspected that she was actually going to say, "That almost hurt more than when I shot myself." They believed that that's what was going to come out of her mouth, but she caught herself just in time.
I'm throwing the keys, okay? I'm throwing the keys.
So they can understand and get the forensics right.
I go like that. I got in the car, jumped in, put the keys in. I just hit my cast. Started the car and left. The car door shut itself. God.
She doesn't seem at all upset.
This is worse than... Okay.
So at this point, police are like, who the hell are we dealing with here? Like, we need to look into her. We are sus as hell. So they start digging into Diane's background. They would uncover some really troubling patterns from her childhood, her adolescence, and also her adulthood. So now it's a month later, right? A month after the shootings and the murder of 1 of her children. And at this point, both of her other children, they're still in critical condition. They're still in the hospital, right? But Diane, she gets all glammed up, gets herself a new hairdo, which, can I just say, this hairdo on her does her no favours. She looks like a mushroom. But anyway, she's all glammed up and she starts giving interviews to the press, you know, the media, talking to them, laughing and smiling with them. Diane would laugh and giggle while she spoke about this awful encounter that happened to her and this ordeal and how it affected her and this awful thing that she had encountered. One thing about Diane, right? She likes to yap. More than me, more than you. She is a certified yapper, but from hell below. And within these interviews, she is always making sure that she's talking about number 1. Her. She's using a lot of like, I, me. She never ever expresses any upset about her children. She doesn't even shed a single tear. She just can't stop smiling. She's like a Cheshire cat. Now, one of the reporters They asked Diane if she feels lucky to have survived such a horrific ordeal, and especially the fact that she only acquired like one minor wound that would heal pretty quick in comparison to her children, one who passed away and two who were in critical condition. Diane horrifyingly turns around to the press and says, "I feel like they were the lucky ones. I mean, I haven't been able to tie my shoes for 2 months."
Everybody says you sure were lucky. Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful. The scar is going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky. If I had been shot the way they were, we all would have died.
So I get this right. You've got a child that's dead and two that are in critical condition, but they're lucky because you can't tie your own shoelace. So at this point in time, Diane Downs, she had already told the police that she doesn't own a gun. Doesn't own one, never has, never will, doesn't want one. Police at the crime scene, they find a .22 caliber casing, but there was no weapon to be found. However, when both Nick and Stephen Downs would be questioned, they confirmed that Diane did in fact own a .22 caliber gun, and police, they were then able to confirm this through purchase records. So they know she's lying about this. But why? So police, with this knowledge, they then decide that they need to search Diane Downs' house to try and locate this gun. So when they get into the house, they find .22 caliber bullets that match the casings found at the crime scene, but they don't find a weapon. And like, why would you hide a weapon or get rid of a weapon if you weren't guilty? Now, not only all of this with the gun, but also the blood spatter in the car and also the gunshot residue did not match her version of events. And to put even more of a crimp in her day and really steam her clams, there was a witness who had seen her that night. So this witness had come forward and explained that they had seen Diane Downs in her car that very night, and they actually had to pass Diane Downs because she was driving so slow, like a turtle or a snail, very slow. Now, during the search that they've conducted in Diane's house, they're also able to find her diary. And in this diary, she wrote pretty extensively about Nick. And she would write how Nick didn't want to be with her because of her children, you know, their baggage, strings attached. She spoke about how she didn't really care for her children. You know, just stuff that you would really not want the police to find when your children have just been brutally injured or killed. It was very clear to police from this diary that Diane was completely obsessed with Nick. She was pressuring him to leave his wife, but he didn't want to leave his wife. He wanted to be with his wife. This was just a fling, this was an affair, and it would end. But this isn't the way Diane seen it. She thought he was in it for the long haul. And then when police spoke to Nick, he confirms, like, Diane was so obsessed with me, she was stalking me, and because I was refusing to leave my wife, she actually threatened to murder my wife. Now, Nick had claimed that even when Diane had moved back to Oregon, she would not leave him alone. She was writing him basically every single day. And in 1983, she had tried to turn up at his house to visit him, and he was like, "Listen, I can't even talk to you anymore because you're so doolally, like you're a complete fruitcake, you're not all there, leave me alone." And he's saying to her, you know, I don't want kids, like I don't want to be a dad, I can't go through that again, like we just can't be together, it's not going to work. And out of everything that Nick says, Diane holds on to the children being the issue. And police at this point, they believe that was her motivation for this crime. Now, ultimately, when it came to this case, Diane Downs had dug her own grave when it came to talking to the media. The smiling, the laughing, the jokes, not showing any emotion, not caring about her children, just wanting to talk about her all the time and never ever about her children. This completely turned the public against her.
When this man shot my daughter, my first reaction was to snap back to my childhood, to the pain that had happened to me back then, my marriage, my entrapment by society. This man was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He had more power because he had a gun. And I stood there and I looked at Christy reaching, and the blood that just kept gushing out of her mouth. And What do you do?
If I had shot my own children, would I not have done a good job of it?
And at the very start, when they heard what happened, before Diane Downs had even given interviews, they felt very sorry for her because what a horrific ordeal for a mother to go through. But the second she stepped in front of that camera, they turned against her. And the public were putting so much pressure on the police to arrest her, but they were very aware at this point, all they had was circumstantial evidence. I'd arrest her anyway, but I'm not the police. And the only real witness that they had to this crime would be Christy Downs. When the attack had happened, Danny, he was actually sleeping in the back of the car. The only one awake would have been Christy. But due to her suffering a stroke, she had trouble communicating. She couldn't speak, but she could kind of communicate in other ways. Nurses had said that whenever Diane Downs would enter the hospital room that Christy was in, her vitals would go through the roof. Her heart rate, everything, just went off the chart. And this signalled to the hospital that Christy was in terror. She was in fear when her mum would enter the room. She was scared of her mum. And at one point, when Diane had went to, visit Christy, she actually told the nurse to pull the plug because she's brain dead anyway. Obviously at this point nurses are like, actually she's not brain dead. So the hospital, they completely refuse to take Christy off life support because they know that this little girl is a warrior and she is going to pull through, and they will find out what happened that night. And this steams Diane's clams because she can't have witnesses. Why, that she doesn't need witnesses. She's told them what happened and that should be enough. Now, 8-year-old Christy, she is an absolute warrior, an absolute warrior. She went through really intensive mental and physical treatment, and she ultimately relearned how to speak. And as soon as she was able to speak again, the authorities had went to her hospital room and they asked her about that night, and they outright asked her, "Who shot you that night?" And she simply stated, "My mom." Now police have exactly what they need to arrest Diane Downs, and she would be arrested on February the 28th of 1984. She would be charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of murder. And she would go to trial, and this would begin in May. Also, I'm trying something new with the lip again, so give me a minute. So during the trial, prosecution, they had argued that the reason Diane had murdered and attempted to murder her children was so she could get rid of them to be with Nick, even though he didn't want to be with her. But let's be real, she's got her own wee fantasy going on up here. And the prosecution psychiatrist, they had diagnosed Diane Downs as a narcissist. She was also diagnosed with histrionicism, which is basically melodramatic behaviour that's used to gain attention and sympathy, and she would also be diagnosed with antisocialism. Now with this, Diane Downs, she fit the profile of malignant hysteria psychopathy. Get this, right? The prosecution, they go ahead and they play Hungry Like the Wolf, Hungry Like the Wolf in court, the song that Diane Downs is claiming one of her children was murdered to and the other 2 children were nearly murdered to. They play this in court and Diane Downs is tapping her foot, bobbing her head like it's her party anthem. No traumatic response, no trigger of trauma from this song being played. She was just enjoying herself like she did the night she killed or attempted to kill her own children. And of course, most of this case would rest on 8-year-old Christy. I mean, she was the only real witness to the crime, and she testified and said that Diane Downs, her mother, had shot the 3 children before then proceeding to shoot herself in the arm. And then in June, Diane Downs would be found guilty of all 3 charges, and she would be sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years in Oregon Women's Correctional Centre. Now, shockingly, yet unshockingly, between her verdict and then sentencing, Diane Downs gave birth to another baby. She said she had met a man on her postal route and they got freaky. And then she gave birth to another child who she named Amy Elizabeth, and she tried to claim that the reason she had given birth to her child, the reason she decided to keep this baby, was because she missed Cheryl, Christy and Danny so much. I'm not buying it. Now, Amy Elizabeth, she was taken away by the state and she was delivered to adoptive parents, and apparently she has had a very good life with them. They provided her with a very happy, stable childhood, which I'm just so happy to hear, and you can read more about her life online if you want to. And then Diane's parental rights to Danny and Christy, they were terminated, and they would actually be adopted by the Lane County District Attorney Fred Hughey, who had actually prosecuted Diane Downs. How amazing is that? What an incredible man. And the story should end here, but I've just got a wee bit aftermath, okay? And this just baffled me. So on July the 11th of 1987, Diane Downs was able to escape prison by jumping a barbed wire fence. She had used her clothes to, flatten down the barbed wire. She got over the wall and she ran away. She didn't run very far. She ran 4 blocks to this man's house. This man was Wayne Cypher, and she had said, can I stay here for a bit? And he was like, sure thing, come on in. Now, the next morning, Diane Downs, she went to introduce herself to her host, and instead of saying, I'm Diane Downs, she introduced herself as the girl with no clothes on. And they started a sexual relationship. What perfume does this woman wear? Because, I'm not seeing this attraction. The guy must have been desperate. Now, Wayne Cypher, he had claimed that after these 10 days with Diane Downs, he had fell completely in love with her. He was besotted by her. Okay. Now, in Diane Downs' cell, police had found a clipboard with some stationery on it, and they were able to make out an address, Wayne Cypher's address, and they go over there right away. They raid his house. They find Diane Downs in bed wearing one of his t-shirts and boxer shorts. So police, they apprehend Diane Downs again, take her back to prison, and she was given an additional 5 years on top of her sentence. And the judge had said that he will make sure she doesn't get out of prison. Now, Diane Downs, to this very day, she still proclaims her innocence. She says that she's a victim just as much as her children. You remember, they're the lucky ones. She couldn't tie her shoelaces for 2 months. And she still remains in prison to this very day at the Central California Women's Facility. And I just hope to God that she gets mistreated in there. I hope she gets treated real bad. People don't like child abusers, child killers, so I can only hope that, someone gets their hands on her. But that is the end of today's True Crime and Makeup episode. I really hope you found this one interesting. It was highly requested, so I wanted to cover it. But if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Make sure you put that notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload, which is 2 times every single week. In the description below, you will find details of all the products used on my face today, alongside my social media handles, Instagram, TikTok. It would mean the world if you would give me a follow over there. Only if you want to. My email address is also in the description if you would want to send over your case suggestions, but you can link them in the comments below if you would prefer. Ultimately, they all just get compiled onto a big document that I'm working my way through. Before you do go though, please make sure you have left a comment on the video just to help boost the engagement and push me out to the YouTube algorithm, because as you know, I want to do this full time and I would produce some really amazing content if I had the time to do so. So please subscribe. But that is it for today's video. Please remember, be a good person, don't be a bad person, stay safe, look after each other, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!